Excellent panel again. Loved hearing what all of you had to say. It was really, really great stuff. So now that you all had the chance to go through the panel discussion previously, you know how this goes. So again, the red microphone is in the middle of the room. I'm going to start with a question, but then we're going to go to the audience after that. So my first question is for Leah. So Leah, since you weren't here earlier, but there's a lot of workforce development and researchers in the room. And for those folks and farmers in the room, can you describe more to us some of the challenges from your perspective for the products you're making, the challenges you've seen from farm bulk kelp coming forward, so that people might have a perspective of what things they need to address if they're looking at doing research projects or things like that?
Sure. I feel like Marcos will have some good contributions to this question as well. Farming bulk kelp is a challenge, so it is on the farm side of thing. I'll speak to that very briefly, then maybe hand it over. But it's a buoyant kelp. There are not systems currently established and tested and highly successful for growing kelps that are buoyant. Like I mentioned, we think this species has a lot of potential on the market, and we have a lot of demand for bulk kelp products at Barnacle Foods. So the growing technology on the farm is one component, and I think considering the quality coming off of the farms as well is another important component. So we're looking at high-value products, and we think developing high-value products is the way that mariculture likely needs to grow at this stage. So we're looking at food products. When an individual is pulled off the farm or even out of the wild and it has biofouling or it's not large enough to go through our processing systems, those all create inefficiencies on the farm and on the processing side of things. So there are a couple of areas to address. Do you want to add anything there?
No, I think you're exactly right. I think that there are a number of technical challenges that with buoyant kelps that we need to address, but I think one of the reasons that it didn't, we put a lot of bulk kelp seed in the water over the first 2 years, and with not terrific results, and a big part of that was the site was not conducive to a bulk kelp production. They like real high flow environments. I think that's part, but even if it were an ideal site, the grow-out structure on the line that we used was not particularly effective. We spent a lot of time trying to counteract buoyancy, and so there's the kelp that grew, and I think it's consistent with other attempts to grow bull kelp was kind of skinny and small, and which drives up, labor costs when you're trying to do things like separate stipe from blade. There's just a lot more pieces. I mean, it's easier to run a 10-pound salmon than it is to, run a 3-pound salmon because there's fewer pieces. So it's, just fundamentally, I think there are a lot of challenges. The processing technology is being developed, and I think that being able to do that efficiently is going to dramatically affect our ability to produce product at a value that works for Barnacle or others like them. I think those are particular challenges, not just for bulk kelp, but for seaweed in general. But I think that there's a real opportunity for some development of technologies. I know that there's some of the group have been trying to find funding for that, but we haven't yet had that kind of grant funding to develop that advanced research.
Okay.
Anything else?
So if I could summarize, so you need higher current sites, you need technology that allows the kelp to grow up and still holds it down.
Right.
And what you've found so far is that it's growing smaller size, kind of skinny and smaller than what you find in the wild.
Yeah.
Generally.
and also, the anchoring, if you were at a high flow area where you're going to get the kind of flow that you need, anchoring systems are going to be a parallel challenge to be able to hold it in that spot when you've got lots of buoyant upward pressure on whatever system you've got and wave action. It's, there's some technical challenges. I think we can solve them, but it's going to take some time and effort.
You want to follow up?
Oh, yeah, the last thing I would say is just a lot of this innovation is happening on the farms, and the risk is being taken on by the kelp farmers. And so there's a lot of opportunity to support that and reduce that risk. I think the trials and the innovation can continue to take place on the farms, but if we could support and kind of buffer their risk, would be a win-win.
Yeah, excellent point. Okay, questions from the audience. Oh, look at that, we got a taker.
Yeah, okay. Is this on or? Okay, great. Eric Osk from IFF. Question for probably Dan, Marcos, Leah, and Tia. The governor mentioned cruise ships. Can you say anything, please, about what that means for marketing? Could that be a big deal with 4 million people showing up on a cruise ship?
Who wants to take that one? Mark?
I can take it. Here's where I see that opportunity, particularly for consumer-facing products. It does two things. One, it's a great opportunity to introduce mariculture products to 1 million or more people every year, give them an opportunity to taste them, to try them, to see them, and then take that knowledge back to their location, wherever they're from. I think that by marketing directly to the cruise ship passengers while they're here, one of the challenges of Alaska is the additional cost of taking our products to market in other places. And when they come here, you save on that freight cost, and that is not an insignificant value. So I think it's a great marketing opportunity. It's a great brand development opportunity for Alaska mariculture products, and I think it makes it more competitive. And I think that market also would provide, if the industry wants to produce the most economic benefit to the local communities, we need to be doing value-added processing here. We need to be like Barnacle, where they're making products here in Alaska, and all of that economic activity occurs here. And that's a pretty substantial marketplace. I think those are the primary things that I see that create value.
Anyone else want to add to that on the panel?
Is this on? Okay, there we go. The cruise ship industry and the tourism industry is really how we got our start. And we had a small little shack in downtown Juneau and fed every tourist who walked by. I don't think we fed 1 million of them, but many of them, we fed them kelp salsa. And that was a big part of our strategy. And we had to take a big left turn when that shut down, but have been able to move beyond it. So I think it's a great opportunity for a business that's starting or looking for that brand recognition, or just introducing people to eating seaweed or other mariculture products that come from here.
Is Trevor Sandy in the room?
Yeah.
Trevor? He might have stepped out. There's actually a whole secondary opportunity around it, which is actually bringing tourists to your farm. And so Trevor has an oyster farm and seaweed farm in Ketchikan, and he started a tour operation as a component of that. And so he actually takes tourists from cruise ships, buses them out to dock, loads them on a boat. They get to see the water, see whales, see seals, see sea lions, go to the farm, taste some oysters, taste some Barnacle seaweed products, see how they farm. They get the whole spiel about sustainable management, clean waters. And when they leave, they just have a whole education, and as well as they've tasted like the best oysters on the planet. So and he charged them the entire time. So it's pretty interesting. Now he's also had some challenges with COVID, but I think he's going to be back at it this year. question from the audience.
Sure. So my question is, well, let me start with this. Taya, thank you. Your talk was really enlightening, and I guess one of the things that maybe will display my ignorance was that the Alaska Seafood Marketing Institute doesn't already represent some of these products. And so maybe my question is for you, Julie. Can you give us a little bit of background? I'm surprised by knowing this, and why don't they do this?
Yeah, my understanding is, it kind of goes back in our history in the state of some conflicts over whether the state wanted, farmed salmon or not. And the state really made that public policy decision that they did not want finfish farming in the state. The salmon industry is such a big part of the state that I think that they really kind of wanted to separate also the marketing efforts from that, even though they did pass legislation to allow for seaweed and shellfish farming. So I don't know if I have a better answer than that. It just specifically does not allow for marketing of aquatic farm products. And so, Taya did a really good description of the things that would have to be changed in order to allow that. We actually had some legislation in the process this past, well, let's see, what year are we in? This past year that was actually clicking away, and we had only 2 legislators, one in each side, one in each body, that didn't like it for various reasons, and that was enough to stop it. The biggest thing was that it didn't fully encompass everything that Taya talked about. It didn't encompass the funding side, and so the legislators wanted parity with the seafood industry that was funding this. So I just think it's going to take more time with the industry to kind of come to consensus on how that works. But it takes a champion to get up and talk about it, and so I really applaud Taya for that.
Thanks. I'll just say that that's kind of one of the reasons I went into the detail of that funding, because a lot of people don't understand sort of the difference and why it hasn't been included. And I think if we all just keep working towards it, we can get that changed, and I think it would be huge for the industry.
I'd also highlight that, that there's this Alaska Seaweed Marketing Communications Plan report that's put out, and I actually was only involved tangentially in it, but it does have a discussion and some more detail on different marketing entities that could lead these marketing efforts.
Thank you.
So I just want to address Leah's question on the bull kelp. So Bill Dewey from Taylor Shellfish in Washington. And Washington State just passed a law to restore 10,000 acres of kelp, bull kelp and eelgrass. And I think we've lost about 80% of our bull kelp, so there's a pretty big focus on that. And the Puget Sound Restoration Fund is working on outplanting efforts with bull kelp, and so I'm just suggesting maybe some collaboration with Washington Department of Natural Resources and Puget Sound Restoration Fund as people are interested in trying to cultivate it.
Yeah, thanks. Puget Sound Restoration Foundation has been a great resource to us. We talk with them frequently and hope they can talk with other kelp farmers too.
Mm-hmm. Additional questions? I know there's some more. I heard some questions when I was sitting out there. Mr. Gross.
Hey, Julie. Good to see you again. It sort of feels like such a small family here. I was just in Ketchikan flying to Sitka yesterday evening.
Actually, you were in Wrangell first.
I was going to say I saw you. I was going to get there. But anyway, we had 3 harrowing attempts on the runway in Sitka last night and overheaded and ended up in Juneau. And I was sitting next to none other than Marcos, who said, great, you get to go to the conference here in Juneau. So thank you very much. It's a really amazing conference. Leia went to school with my son, I believe, Eric, or at least one of my kids here in Juneau. So it's really congratulations. It's an amazing company. But I have questions for both you and Daniel. Daniel, in your earlier slide that projected up to 100 million and 300 million, you were saying that now we're at 1.5 million for revenue. And I think that was just for kelp, and I'm surprised. How do you measure that? Because with so many kelp farms going on, including the one sitting next to you, that seemed like a low number. And so how are you measuring?
It's actually kelp and shellfish, so 1.5 million, and we do have to kind of make some, have some conversations with different farmers and kind of add them up in our heads. There's some publicly available data and some not, but 1.5 million for industry revenue, roughly, in recent years for shellfish, oysters, and seaweed. That's primarily
Wow, that seemed low given the number of.
It is low. That's part of the point. Is that we
know,
actually
right.
there's some realism there with and you look back 20, 30, 40 years, and there's just been a very slow. We've been above that slightly, but not much, not above 2 million.
That's interesting. I've had a lot of pickles at your mom and dad's place at the Gustavus Inn many years ago too, so thank you. But my other question is for Leah. You said that you had a supply problem, and that surprised me. You're harvesting wild bull kelp. The picture you showed a lot of bull kelp, and you're obviously harvesting this in a sustained fashion. So how do you determine how do you selectively cut it?
Sure. Just briefly, there are limitations in how and where we harvest bull kelp in the wild, and it's something that we think requires a lot of research in order to scale. So while that research could take place in the future, and maybe we find that increasing harvest significantly in the wild is truly sustainable and the resource can support that, that's not where we're at right now. So we're limited in what we can harvest based on the regulations, which we fully support, around harvesting wild bull kelp. And we're limited by the fact that there haven't been too many successes on farms farming bull kelp.
Okay, thank you. Congratulations again on your company.
Great. Thanks, everyone, for entertaining my question. And I want to start by just thanking you all for being here, and Julie for putting on such a really fantastic conference, and all the organizers. It's really exciting. I had a chance to work with Julie maybe 10 years ago when the cluster initiative was just beginning. My name is Debbie Hart. I'm a coordinator for the Southeast Alaska Fish Habitat Partnership, and I put a little flyer on your table. But Julie, wow, how far you guys have come. And this is so exciting. And I want to thank Eric for the question about cruise ships. So that's going to be my question to you guys. And I was debating whether I should save this question for tomorrow when it's more the policy government kind of question. But here we have our industry reps and others in the room that might want to answer this. But cruise ships are they're a huge part of what can make this really work, right? They're such an important marketing audience. But we're at an interesting time. We're going to be potentially doing away with the Ocean Rangers program, and so monitoring ocean dumping. And unfortunately, cruise ships don't always have the best track record across the world. And Alaska is pristine, and we do have clean water, and we all want to maintain the habitat. From an industry perspective, what are some of your thoughts in terms of trying to work with the cruise ship industry to be more self-regulating if we don't have the Ocean Rangers program? How have you worked in the past to help, some of these industries that aren't necessarily as clean, recognize that it's important for you guys, it's an important thing for your product? So thanks. It's an open question.
Is there anyone? I actually was hoping Tommy Marsh was in the room because wastewater is her favorite topic when she talks about mariculture. She sees a whole different vision than most of us do when we talk about mariculture, because you actually can use it to treat water. But that might be a conversation for a different day. Robert.
Well, I think that there's the past, there's the present, there's the future. So without talking about the past, which I would not disagree with you on, I think what we're seeing currently is a very keen awareness of being more green. I see that on the energy side. I see that in their investments throughout the region, across the state. And I think that there is a new opportunity. And I think that having our champions out on the water provides us eyes and ears that, we have better engagement and oversight in many other ways. So I think that there's an opportunity to meet them and help articulate our priorities, which are their priorities, even if they're not always aware of it.
Yeah, Mark?
I agree with that, but I would also add that I think my expectation for the production side of mariculture is likely to be more active in areas that are not typically, you don't see cruise ships go through there. And because the site lease application process is a competing use analysis, and at the moment, under the statute, aquatic farming has the lowest priority use. So those sites have to be in places that aren't anchorages, that doesn't have vessel traffic, that doesn't have, I mean, there are a lot of reasons why I think you'll see that development occur in other places, and the cruise ship industry as a marketing opportunity is going to be for finished products. It's not going to be for raw material. It's going to be Barnacle selling to them and companies like that. That would be, I guess it doesn't really answer the question, but I think that kind of provides some perspective.
There's more that I would like to say there, but I did want to mention, Mike Steckel, are you in the room? Dr. Steckel? So you might want to talk to Mike. He actually worked on some of the wastewater treatment systems, I believe, that the cruise ships were required to put in place back, 10, 15 years ago, and was part of a sort of a steering committee. Is that right, Mike? Am I getting these details right? Yes, no? Anyway, so Debbie, I think Mike would be great to talk to about that.
Great, thank you. Thanks, you guys. Thanks for the answers.
Next question, please.
Hi, I'm Nettie LaBelle-Hamer. I'm the Vice Chancellor for Research at the University of Alaska Fairbanks. And I have learned so much today, I think I have to go home and rest. But I wanted to kind of add to the conversation a little bit about cruises. I've taken exactly one cruise in my entire life, and I think for me it was a one and done. There's really not a lot to do on a ship, in my opinion. I know people love cruises, but here's the thing that really started me thinking. Putting Taya's presentation about marketing together with a discussion about the cruise ships. You have different excursions on. I'm telling everybody knows this except me. I'd never gone on a cruise before. So the different excursions, you pay for them, right? They're not free. The one that we enjoyed the most was something called voluntourism, and we did it in Darwin, Australia. And when we spent all this time in beautiful beaches, et cetera, but my husband and I talked the most about the time that we went to a farm in Darwin, and we were allowed to plant trees. Yep, they put us to work. We were planting trees for butterflies. We learned about the farming community. We learned about the region, and et cetera. It was an educational experience. It was fantastic. I would do that again in a heartbeat, and I would pay for it. So I think that there's really something here. Alaska is cool. Alaska is sexy. It's on every channel. If all my relatives ask me if I'm watching this reality TV and that reality TV, I say, I live in Fairbanks, Alaska. That is my reality TV. So no, I don't watch those shows. But the voluntourism, the ecotourism, I really think there's a there. And when you start putting that together with the marketing plans and the discussions that were presented here today, I think there's really something that we could work on. It would help the small businesses, and I don't know. I think it's a great idea. Yes, we have to. Oh, she's gone. But we have to be careful to make sure it's clean. But that's part of the draw too, because I think that's a big part of the culture, especially the younger generations. They're coming in with a much more green, clean concept, and I think we embrace that. So thank you very much for your presentations.
You're welcome. Anyone want to follow up on that at all, Taya?
No, I mean, that's an interesting idea. I know for the first time we're going to have sort of a medium-sized cruise ships coming to Cordova, and if the timing worked, I would absolutely take them to the kelp farm. It would be the first thing I would do. I don't think it's going to work, but we'll see. But I just want to add one thing about the cruise ships, and maybe Leah can answer this. I mean, there's two aspects to marketing to a cruise ship. There's the one that you talked about when they come off and they come by your shop. The other thing is getting your products actually on board the ship and serving them, which I know that the Alaska Seafood, ASME, has done, which has been great, that they're on these ships that are coming to Alaska, they're serving Alaska salmon and other Alaska seafood. So I think that's also an area to get our products actually being served on the ships, like your wonderful salsa and hot sauce. And so that's something else to keep in mind.
And I wanted to say that I know there's been some recent conversations that the Alaska Seafood Marketing Institute board and staff and the administration and some of the lead cruise line companies have had recent sit-downs about how can we market more to the cruise ships passengers when they come through here. For instance, ASME already makes great videos that some of you have maybe seen played at the airport in Anchorage. Well, would the tour ships play those on board when they're cruising around Southeast? And it sounds like it was a very positive conversation, and they're going to continue with follow-up. So that's another sort of an avenue. It's a more generalized thing. But yeah, there's tons of, it's like, you know, it's only limited by your imagination that there is, that they're bringing 1.4 million people to Alaska, and they get to see the beautiful area, the pristine waters, they get to see all these little people and boats running around, and they're just fascinated, and that's a perfect opportunity to provide marketing to them. Okay, any other questions? Heather, do you want to ask your question, or do you want me to?
Thanks, Julie. I'm Heather McCarty. I'm from Juneau, and I was on the Mariculture Task Force with a lot of the rest of these folks. I know this has been an Alaska-centric discussion, but I wanted to ask Hugh a question. I don't know, the reason I hesitated is it might be confidential, but I wanted to know where your original seed money came from. I mean, I was impressed by your group's mission and by what they have accomplished. And I'm wondering if it was private money that you started with. You had to start somewhere, so I'm curious as to how it evolved.
Do you mean the organization as a whole, or the loan fund, or?
Both, actually. I was thinking about the loan fund, but it had to have been supported by the institution itself. And I'm just curious about the history a little bit more, if you wouldn't mind.
Our president was Ron Phillips, and he started the company as a nonprofit 45 years ago in Mid-Coast, Maine, in the town of Wiscasset, and basically started going after grant funds and, you know, bringing in loan capital that could be put into revolving loan funds. And that's, you know, our website has a pretty comprehensive history. There's a 25-year storybook on how that all started. But the fisheries lending specifically came about in 1994. We capitalized a loan fund from the EDA, which is what we've turned over several times. And we actually started a second fund in 2005, I believe. So we right now we have 2 EDA fisheries and aquaculture loan funds. The first one was capitalized at $1 million. The second one was $500,000, and it's just been a great way to keep putting that money back into those businesses.
Thank you. Thanks very much. I have one question for Dan, if I could. Mm-hmm. Dan, I really enjoyed your presentation, and I think it's important that we all get sort of factual information as we embark on this industry growth. I was wondering if there are other areas, and this may go a little beyond this panel discussion, but are there other areas in mariculture development in Alaska that you think warrant more research? And I'm not talking about scientific research, I'm talking more about economic research. One of the things we heard from Kate, and I don't think she's on, is she? But I had a question for her because she said something that really resonated with me and I think with a lot of people here. Don't let a few multinational corporations dominate the industry. And yet, on the other hand, we've talked a lot about the limitations in Alaska, you know, the challenges of distance, shipping, all of those things. For value-added production, you need materials and so on that have to be shipped in, and then everything has to be shipped out. I mean, it's an issue for the seafood industry as a whole. And so I'm wondering about the economics of small businesses in remote areas and how they compete with large multinational corporations that are already established and have marketing routes and everything else. So I'm wondering if you've thought about that at your organization and if you're thinking about doing additional work in those areas.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. There's a couple of ways I would answer that. One is, you know, looking at some of the things funded in the Build Back Better thing, looking at some of who our typical clients are. You know, we work, really small businesses don't have enough money to do this kind of planning and research or feasibility work. Bigger businesses often will have internal resources. It's kind of those medium-sized ones that we do want to see be from Alaska that need, and sometimes need help seeing that they have a problem that there's a solution to, or working with in-state experts to find out the information they need. So I think that's where I would point to, is working out some of those business models, more detail, looking at feasibility studies for different community or private sector investments that aren't supported by expertise at large firms that need more than the expertise they have in-house. We can't all be experts in everything. So we you know, looking to others. Our firm is certainly available and interested, but there are others I could recommend. I'm happy to recommend other firms as well if somebody has a question for me.
Thank you. And Julie, if there are other members of the panel that have thoughts on that, that would be interesting.
Julie
as
might
well.
have thoughts too. You're really good at using contractors and research.
Well, I think, I don't know if you wanted to address more the issue of sort of small, remote versus the multinational, that dynamic. Heather?
I mean, I'm not sure what part are you thinking about, Julie. We certainly want to support businesses that spread the benefits more widely. We also aren't anti-large, you know, entities as anchor customers.
Yeah, I guess I think it's not rocket science, right, or too hard of economics to say that the small-scale remote operations are going to have high costs and probably less profitability, and sometimes there's even struggle to have any profit. Some folks that's fine with them. That's more lifestyle, you know, operation. The more that you can combine those little operations into groups of little operations, right, you're going to be able to share services and equipment and things like that, and maybe have more profitability. And so, you know, I think there's going to be a variety of things that occur. You know, frankly, having a large multinational company come in, I don't know, you know, how do I put this? If anyone would sell to them. I mean, there's tensions like that, right, in small communities. Unless you're going to, you know, pay some outrageous amount that you cannot sustain as a company. Like, there's people have sort of allegiances as well to their neighbor and their, you know, company that they've built relationships with and such. So you know, how does that unfold in Alaska? I think the story has yet to be written, right? And that's a part of why we're listening to all these other people and listening to their stories and things to sort of watch out for and consider.
Right.
Robert, I think, wanted to follow up.
I have a question for Hugh if there's time at the end. But two things. One of the opportunities or / concerns that we had at the beginning of the Prince of Wales Island processing facility is that we wanted that facility to be in the hands of a nonprofit rather than an entity that could push out the smaller local businesses that needed the space. They could either monopolize the space or set rates that were become non-competitive. So we thought that model was important for the growth of the mariculture industry there around the island, and hopefully be a model elsewhere. But one of the things about the workforce component, the workforce development component of our Build Back Better Regional Challenge, in talking with our folks here in the region at Sea Alaska and Central Council, you know, we talk about workforce development in the context we want to make sure everybody has got the job skills to get a job in the industry. That's very unsatisfying. That's too low of a bar. We want to raise the bar so that there's a career track, so that we have our locals and our Alaska Natives able to be the ones that are establishing the businesses that are hiring those that traditionally are looking for the job. So we were kind of looking at a two-track opportunity for developing those local corporations that can develop the workforce and be the employers, not just the employees.
Thank you.
Mark?
Yeah, and I could add one other thing to that, and if the seafood industry is any history is telling at all, you know, there have been companies that have come in that were not familiar with what it takes a lot of local knowledge to operate effectively in Alaska, and it's really, really challenging for companies that aren't familiar with that and don't have that understanding to be successful here. Where I think that you'll see these, as the scale of production increases, you will find that those companies are great markets for product, but I actually don't expect them to come and operate here, but I would expect them to buy some raw material that they would make other products out of. I think that's a very different role, but that would be my expectation.
Well, just so everyone knows, that the Mariculture Task Force talked about this issue a lot because, like Kate said and others on this panel have said, it's important that the benefits accrue to coastal communities in Alaska. That's important to a lot of us. And so I'm seeing this not a straight pathway to that, I guess, given all the challenges. So that's why I'm starting the conversation here. Maybe we'll talk more about it during the sort of policy discussions tomorrow, but I thought this was a good panel to speak to it. Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm. Yes, Eric.
Yeah, so Eric again. Look, I work for a $13 billion company, and we're one of the larger seaweed markets in the world, I would say. What I would say about this topic is that, you know, there's 26,000 species of seaweed. There's going to be many markets, many products. Some will be smarter to go to a plant that could process 100,000 tons, and then folks could focus on farming rather than processing and marketing. Some will not. You know, who knows what we're talking about? We don't know the future. It could be hydrocolloids, it could be bioactive compounds, it could be food, it could be, you know, spa products, and they're all going to be unique. Mm-hmm. So it's not this or that. It's going to be 20 things going on here with 20 different market sizes. Right?
Yeah, and I guess I'll mention something. Mike might talk about it later, but there's actually people that want to use seaweed to potentially sort of biomine rare earth element products, rare earth elements, so that we can have more of that to make an energy transition to sort of out of fossil-based fuels. And the idea seems completely crazy to me, but I sat in a room full of PhDs and they all are super interested in it. So yes, I mean, I think that goes to your point, like we don't really know exactly what we're going to be doing with all this stuff in 10, 20, 30 years. Yeah.
Well, I'll just say that I think this is the opportunity that we have here in Alaska, especially at the stage of the industry right now, is to decide how we want to grow it and what sort of business we might incentivize or who we want to benefit from it. And not to say any of these opportunities are exclusive and we have to choose one of them, but incentivizing Alaskan businesses who are in coastal communities, rural communities, and providing more resource and opportunity to those individuals could be a really great way to build an industry that does bring a lot of positive impact.
That's a very good point. Yes, Eric.
Hi.
You're here. Thanks for coming.
Yeah, I'm Eric Wyatt. I'm, I guess for Alaska, pretty long term oyster farmer. I'm a, whatever, third generation fisherman too. And I think I'm going to say something because I do have an opinion, but then I'm coming from the real remote, and then you get this room full of people, I got to put the dots together. But predominantly as an oyster farmer, and I've dallied with bull kelp, some of your seed, and I could talk about, even deep with weight, still was small. There's a lot to explore. But oyster farming, Dan, you had some numbers about historical mariculture, but I think if you broke it down between oysters and kelp, what's that look like?
I mean, the industry is far and away dominated by oyster revenue right now. Yeah, so it's minuscule.
It's almost all that. And that's, of course, I'm president now, thanks to many people here, of the Alaska Mariculture Association Alliance, which is, all mariculture products. So we're going to work together, and there's very different, we'll say, species under the same hat, so to speak. But I can say more my point or area that I kind of champion is I'm very interested in, I like smaller businesses. In this case, we want to develop profitable ones. One of our biggest issues of all these years is crew, period. Mm-hmm. That's with every business out there, right? That's a limiting factor. And two, we focus on really feeding people in the state. Very little goes out. In fact, wouldn't that be great for food security if more was available here and access to it? And so that's a very different part in terms of the ideas of marketing, why the existing farmers go, well, we don't really need to market, we don't need more bureaucracy, we don't need more tax. It's that kind of thinking, don't see the value of it when really we're focused on our state market. Why not outside? Because then we have all those transportation costs, and of course we're competing with the whatever commodity price in Washington or whatnot. I probably get paid less per oyster than anybody in down south, honestly, but I still make it work. And that's part of the reason since I do live remotely, well, comparatively from the roadhead, grow a lot of seed, right? Has higher value. And so my customers, like Maida and others, are quite a number of smaller and profitable and good businesses. So that's who I really champion, naturally. So that's part of our equation, what vision do we see going forward, trying to create opportunity yet protect what we have. protect our environment, communities, and access to our, subsistence and natural foods, and have opportunity for everybody in some equitable way. And I'll put my own plug in, is if the matching grant loan funds, forget the phrase right, in the governor's proposed budget comes through, I think that's something that could really help us. And that is where you're matching, in my mind, our own dollars and making those go farther to buy. I can name several pieces of equipment or things that would really help my operation right now. And that's an existing operation that has existing markets. I've got everything lined up and happening already. I just don't want to take on more debt to make that happen. I'm already capped on that. So that's a different kind of thinking than what kind of grant, or what studies or whatnot. And that's in this conversation too. So if you want to talk oysters or shellfish, I'll be here.
Great. Thank you. Any other questions? We're a couple minutes out, so we could take one last question if there is one out there.
I've got one if there's not.
Robert, you have the floor.
Now the bartender's not here anyway, so we got time if there's another question.
You better get here fast.
Okay. All right. So here, my question is for Hugh. So we'll hear a lot more tomorrow about different funding mechanisms, and the state's got a great revolving loan fund. We got wonderful financial institutions throughout. But one of the reasons we included a revolving loan fund in our Build Back Better regional challenge is because we were hearing from rural communities and small operators that it's a challenge for them to collateralize loans. I mean, literally, to get started, they've got to come up with tens of thousands of dollars in concrete that they just literally sink in the water. Banks don't want to go after that as recognized as collateral. So to set up a revolving loan fund that really is investing in people as much as the business plans that Marcos talked about. And I'm just curious, does your revolving loan fund have flexibility for that? How do you define collateral? And is that something that's unique for what you do, or is yours more along the conventional lines?
Yeah, we definitely still look at collateral, and typically we try not to have someone put their house up for collateral. Typically, we're more looking at a vessel, if it's a fisherman looking to transition or add sea farming to their to what they do. I'd say we probably we're a little more flexible than some of the traditional banks because we are willing to take a chance. We financed the first kelp company in Maine. We financed the first scallop farm company in Maine. We financed some of the first mussel farming going on in the state. We just financed a land-based RAS eel facility, so glass eels, which are, they're already being harvested from the wild, but they're then essentially raising them to adults in a land-based facility. So we do still look at collateral, but we understand that there's challenges there, and try to take a chance. We're willing to do that. And I saw the RLF was, I think, bullet 7 on your list, and that's fine. It doesn't matter where it is in the list. It's probably maybe one of the last things that's needed. But when businesses need capital to scale up, this gentleman talking about oysters, he's already up and running, and taking on more debt is maybe not the most attractive thing, but an established business probably could handle it and eventually, really continue to grow. So that's kind of our philosophy with it.
Thanks.
Mm-hmm. Okay, any other questions from the audience? All right, I think we're done for the day.
Oh, no, we got to wrap up.
Oh, we got to wrap up. Robert is going to do the wrap up for us here.
All
How about a round of applause for the fantastic panel?